He said, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. I felt fear myself more times than I can remember, but listen, I hid it behind a mask of boldness. I think that's interesting. Goes on to say this, the brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. I want to talk today. Today's message is entitled, Doing It Afraid. Doing it afraid. In other words, making the repetitive choice to not let the fears of this world or the fears in your life dictate the direction of your life. And last week, I talked about a man by the name of Gideon in the Old Testament. He was an underdog and also simultaneously full of fear. And I talked about how God called him a hero, not because he was doing heroic things. He wasn't doing anything heroic yet. God called him a hero, but rather it's because God saw the potential inside of him when he didn't see the potential inside of himself. And this week, I want to continue that talk. I said, you know what, I want to do part 2 this week. If you weren't here last week, I really encourage you, go back online, go to our website, listen to it. It's encouraged a lot of people, and it will make today make a little bit more sense also. But even if you didn't hear last week, it's all right, because there are multiple times in life that you and I are going to have to choose to not fear, and whether we are gonna live by faith or whether we're gonna live by fear. It's gonna happen almost daily in our lives. In fact, in our lives right now and in our world, there's a lot to be, well, afraid of. There's current events. There's maybe health concerns. Maybe personal challenges. Maybe some of you are going off to college. Maybe some of you going back into school. Some of you are going into the unknown. We can fear the future. There are all kinds of things that we can be afraid of. In fact, sometimes it's easy to allow fear to be our compass. In fact, it's our compass sometimes in our relationships, our finances, maybe our career or in our life. We allow fear to lead us, not God, not even right choices or his word, but rather fear. So here's the $1 million question. Is it possible to live without fear? Is that possible? Well, in short, this is my opinion, no. Instead, fear, can be a compass, but not making a compass doesn't mean that sometimes it's not your companion. In other words, sometimes, even if you're overcoming fear, fear is kind of a companion in life from time to time. It enters into life, it gets conquered, it comes back again. I mean, it's something that sometimes we as individuals will continue to fear. There's a guy by the name of Jocko Willink, and some of you know who he is. He said this, he goes, do not run from fear, understand it. I think that's a very biblical wisdom key. Now he may not understand it's actually biblical when he said it, but it actually is biblical because he's right. Fear is a part of our life, and we must understand it in the light of God's purpose and his power. Does that make sense? Because if you avoid the things, this is so important, if you avoid the things that make you afraid, you will live a diminished life. If you're constantly avoiding things that make you afraid. Everything, ladies and gentlemen, at City First, young and old, and everybody in between, everything in life that is worth having is on the other side of fear, risk, and hard work. You can give that a round of applause. Your dream, God's dream for you, God's purpose for you, a great marriage, finances, all the things in life, your education, achievement, godly success, all of that is on the other side of fear and the other side of risk and the other side of hard work. So Gideon was a Jewish man that lived thousands of years ago, and he was an Israelite. He was one of God's people, and it was during a time when God's people were rebelling against God, and they were worshiping false idols. And because of the people's disobedience, an evil nation had come in and conquered God's people. They were called the Midianites. And now God's people were living in constant fear and oppression. But God asked Gideon, an unlikely hero, a person who was an underdog, like we talked about last week, to do something very brave and to do something very risky. And let's go ahead and read it. It's in Judges chapter 6, verse 14. It says, God said, go in this might, in other words, the might that God gave him, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? Now, the reason we are even here today in the second week talking about Gideon is because he said yes to God's call to free his people from captivity. And although Gideon says yes, many times like us, he said yes, but also he was full of hesitancy and was very unenthusiastic about the task at hand. Gideon is what I call a reluctant hero. He's a reluctant hero. He doesn't necessarily want to do it, but he says, okay, I will. In fact, he replies to God and listen to his tone, because this is normally the tone that many times we have when we face a challenge or something bigger than us in life. This is what he says to God in verse 15. He says, please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. In other words, he starts talking about all his deficiencies. And I think we can relate. You know, it was back in 1992. I was 22 years old at the time, and the pastors of this church had approached me, and they said that they wanted me to research a discipleship ministry to start here at this church. I was just like an intern at the time. And they had a vision for this discipleship ministry at what was at the time called First Assembly of God of Rockford, this church before it turned into City First Church. And so this is a vision they had of like a ministry where students, young adults would come from all over the nation. They'd be here for at least a year in Rockford, and they would learn spiritual leadership. And they wanted me to research it, create it, and run it. And I'm 22 years old. I'm kind of fresh out of, like my education and such. And so they put me on a plane to Arizona, went to Phoenix, Arizona, to a church that had put together a similar program to what they were envisioning. And they wanted me to shadow that program for a couple of weeks and see what they were doing. So I spent 2 weeks there, and I went every day, and I would shadow the ministry, and I would pick the brain of the person leading the ministry. It was a powerful ministry. Dozens of students from around the nation had come there, and they were like learning the Word of God. They were learning ministry. They were being developed in life. They were making an impact in Phoenix and beyond. I mean, it was amazing. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I called back to Rockford, and I talked to the pastor, and I said this: I can't do it. Literally, I did. I got on the phone. I'll never forget this phone call. I was like, I can't do it. I go, this is too big. I don't know how to create this ministry. This church is bigger than our church. And you know what? I'm not sure anyone would want to come to this thing that I would create. And I don't think I'm your guy. And like literally, I'm on the phone and I'm talking to the pastor. I mean, this is a terrible like job interview moment, right? I'm like, I'm not your guy. I can't do this. And the pastor laughed and said, oh, Jeremy, just get back here and we'll figure it out. And so for the next year, I prayerfully began to put together this ministry that would be called the Rockford Masters Commission, that now over 30 years later is called the City First Leadership College. And in the last 30 plus years, there's been over 1,300 graduates, people that have come from around the nation and even other nations that have come here for 1 year or multiple years to learn how to lead, to be discipled. And many of them have launched into ministry, and many of them have launched into the marketplace. And here's the thing: fear almost stopped it all. There's a huge portion of our staff that has come up through this leadership college and are now on staff. All those people wouldn't be here. Like literally, all of the last 30 years of ministry that this ministry had done and has done would have not happened. Like all of it could be deleted because of fear. Fear in my heart. If I needed encouragement, thank God that pastor encouraged me. But I'll tell you what, if fear had won, if fear was the compass at that moment, guess what? None of that would have happened. Fear would have stopped it. Now, here's my question to you. Wherever you're at, whether you're young or old, I want to ask you, what is fear stopping you from doing right now? What is fear stopping you from doing? It doesn't matter if you're even a retiree. You can allow fear to be your compass. You see, here's the thing. Is fear stopping you from going back to school? Is fear stopping you from pursuing that new job? Is fear stopping you from tithing? Is fear stopping you from joining a life group or having that difficult conversation or pursuing that dream? What is fear roadblocking in your life? See, Gideon starts making all these excuses. He's like, well, I'm too weak and I'm not equipped to lead. And I didn't come from a tribe of warriors. I came from a tribe that didn't train up warriors. And so I'm not a warrior, God. I don't know how to overtake the Midianites. And then he even said this, he goes, even my family of origin, I'm the youngest. I'm the runt of the family. Yeah, God, there are so many other people that you could choose. Why me? Have you ever prayed to God, why me? I mean, I've prayed those prayers. Why me? Why me, right? And here's what I know about us as humans. We are really good at getting the laundry list of all the reasons why we are disqualified. We are really good at coming up with those, right? The minute that we come up against something, all of a sudden, it's like our brain is hardwired to just go negative and pathological, and here's all the reasons why it's not gonna work. Here's all the reasons why I'm not gonna work. Here's the reasons why I am not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I don't have enough money. I won't be able to do this. I will fail. People won't listen to me. All of the things. So what does Gideon hear God speak back to him after he's given his laundry list to God of all the reasons why he's disqualified? This is what God says. God says in verse 16, he goes, but I will be with you. I will be with you. Now I love this because not only is face value, that's a great answer. Obviously it's God, so it's a brilliant answer, right? But on top of that, notice what God didn't do. God didn't look back at Gideon and go, oh no, Gideon, you are amazing. You're talented. You got it all together. You're gonna be fine. No. He didn't speak back to Gideon's list of perceived deficiencies. God didn't speak back to it, nor did God speak about anything else regarding Gideon's talent, abilities, or capacities. All God did was look back at him and say, I'll be with you. That's all. And here's the thing. Some of the deficiencies that we perceive having in ourselves are real. They are. I mean, like literally, when I said to the pastor, I don't know that I can do this, I'm not sure I wasn't incorrect. I actually think maybe I was right in that. But here's the thing that I discounted. I discounted the fact that God was with me. And here's the thing. Some of the barriers between you and the dream, or between you and the purpose God has for you, or you and the thing that you want to see achieved in your life, some of those barriers are real. They're not fiction. But God doesn't speak to those things. Rather, he speaks to you and says, oh, I know that barrier's in front of you, but I'm with you. I'm with you. And Gideon, that's all that you need. And I would say that's all that you need, John, and you need Mary, and you need Jeremy. Okay, all we need is God with us. It says in Hebrews chapter 13, God said this. He said, I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. So we can be sure when we say, I will not be afraid because the Lord is my helper. You may not be qualified to win the battle, but guess what? God is. And all that Gideon needed was God with him. That's all that he needed, all right? And so here's the thing. I noticed as I was reading about Gideon is kind of intrigued by this assignment that God gave him. Like, part of him is leaning into it like, yeah, we're oppressed as a people, and someone needs to lead God's people to freedom. And so he's kind of intrigued by it. But simultaneously, he's afraid, he's hesitant, and he has many questions. And the reality is that we as individuals live as two people at once most of the time. Let me say it again. We live most of the time as two people at once. Like, there's a side of us that wants to go for it, right? There's a side of us that's like, yeah, I believe that I could do this. I believe I could do this. But then there's this other side of us that we want to stay comfortable and safe, and we don't want to risk. See, part of us wants to stretch, and part of us wants to just say, I'll go take a nap, right? Part of us wants to be bold, and part of us wants to live a life that we can, quote unquote, control, all right? Even though control is not real. You know, presently as a church, even City First, and we've been really pursuing this for years, but we have this vision to start what is called the City First Empowerment Center. And what an empowerment center will be is another location of City First, and it will be strategically designed as a ministry to help give lift to those that are under-resourced. And so we're gonna do it all in the name of Jesus. We're not just gonna give help, but we are gonna do it in the name of Jesus. It will involve, after-school programming. It will involve care to families. It will help with food insecurity, all the different things. And most of all, most importantly, that we will tell people about Jesus and how he can change their lives. Like it's been something that we're just like fired up about. We wanted to do this, and then COVID hit, right? Then COVID. And it kind of stalled it out for a few years. And now in the last year or so, we've been kind of firing it back up again. And behind the scenes, we're doing all kinds of things. We established our own 501c3. We created a logo for it. We're working with community leaders. I've met with the mayor. I mean, there's all these things that we're doing. And even the distribution of food, that now we are at over 3.5 million pounds of food that we've distributed. All of that is a part of this Empowerment Center effort, even though we don't have a building yet. So we've been proactively looking for buildings, and we just haven't found the right one, and the ones that are available, we just don't feel like it's right. And here's the thing. Every week I'm thinking about it. And also every week I'm thinking about the cost of it, to be honest with you. It's gonna cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do something like this. And if you haven't noticed, the economy is a little rough right now. And cost of living is up. And guess what? People are having a harder time, some of them giving. And all these things, and everything we do around here is done because of people's giving. It's not done because we get money from somewhere else. And so at the time that we have the most vision to do something that's expensive is the time that the economy is kind of doing this. And I, inside of my heart, just to be real for a moment and transparent, I'm a little fearful of that. I mean, there's a part of me that kind of wants to go, let's just shelve this for a moment. And again, we're gonna use wisdom and all those kind of things, pray for the right timing and all that. But here's what I've noticed. Sometimes God gives us a vision that is a little daunting, right? And it would be easier as a church, I'll be honest, it would be easier as a church to be open only on Sundays, like a lot of churches are, preach a nice little message, go home, I'll see you next Sunday. It'd be easier. But that's not what God's called City First to do. God's called City First to be a light on a hill and to make a difference in a city and in the cities that we're a part of and the correctional facilities that we're a part of. And so guess what? We are not just a Sunday church. We're a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday kind of church, right? And we're like trying to make a difference. And so here's the thing. What gives us the courage to keep pursuing things like the Empowerment Center? We know that God is with us. And if God is with us, guess what? We're gonna be okay. We're gonna have the wisdom that we need, the favor that we need, the finances that we need, the strength that we need. We're gonna have all of that. You see, we as people are really two people at once. We can be filled with faith and also have fear. And guess what? We can have courage and at the same time be battling cowardice. And we can be confident and also questioning, right? So we can be assured and yet battling anxiety. We can be willing and yet weak. We can be ready and yet reluctant. It's all of this tension inside of us as people. And here's the question: which of those realities win? Which one wins? Does fear win or does faith win? See, Gideon's yes to God was full of both faith and a little fear. They coexisted. In fact, I think rarely do they exist without each other. Like we have this idea in our mind that we will move forward and we'll be all heroic in our faith once all of the barriers are removed, all the fear is gone, there's no more doubts, we're very confident. We have this idea that that's when we get the green light. It doesn't work that way. Everyone you look up to does it afraid. And today, that's why I'm talking to all of us. You need to do it afraid. Whatever it is that God called you to do, whatever it is that is the goal that He's put in your heart, whatever problem that you feel like God is having you solve, you have to do it afraid. What's God asking you to do? You're gonna have to do it afraid. You gotta quit waiting until the anxiety's gone. You got to quit waiting until the fear is gone. You got to quit waiting until you don't feel nervous anymore. Because if you're waiting for those moments, you will be waiting forever, like the movie, right? So how do you do it afraid? Well, real quickly, number one, you got to understand what you wear. You're like, understand what I wear? What do you mean, understand what I wear? Well, I love what it says in Judges chapter 6, verse 34. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. Do you understand that we are to put on a garment of praise, but also we're going to put on a garment of power? Every day when you get up and you put on your physical clothes, I want you to remember that as you pray to God, you are also putting on spiritual clothes. You're putting on God's power as you go to work, as you go to the work site, as you go to school, wherever you go, you are putting on the power of God. He is with you. God was promising Gideon that He would supply strength and power and favor to accomplish the task. And this isn't just for Gideon. In fact, Jesus said this to His followers right before He ascended to heaven, which means that if Jesus said it to them, He's also saying it to us. It's in Luke chapter 24. Jesus said, I'm going to send you what my Father has promised, in other words, the Holy Spirit, but stay in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high. There's a strength that is on top of your strength. There's a power that is on top of your power. There's a favor that's on top of your favor. Without God, you cannot win the battle. But the Lord says this, the battle belongs to Him. So when you wear God's strength day in and day out, guess what? The battle belongs to Him. You're putting on His strength, not your strength. You're putting on His strength as you go into battle every single day. Number two is this, you need to realize that less is more. Now, we don't like this point, okay? I'm going to tell you right away, you're just not going to like this point. But it's true. Gideon had assembled 32,000 soldiers to attack the Midianites. 32,000, all right? And God said to Gideon, that's too many. In fact, I'm going to ask you to do something that's unthinkable. He told Gideon this. He goes, go in front of the 32,000 soldiers and ask them this. How many of you are afraid? And if you are afraid about going into battle, you have a pass to go back home. Now, literally, this is what God had Gideon do. So Gideon gets up and he goes, if you're afraid to go into battle, you can go home. And 22,000 soldiers left and went home. 22,000. Now, think about this. Start with 32, minus 22, now you're at 10,000 soldiers. Still a lot, but God said, oh, that's still too many. God said, I want you, Gideon, to take them to a local spring, a creek, a stream, and have them drink. And how they drank is going to determine whether or not they should stay in the army. And so it says in verse 6, only 300 of the men drank from their hands, and all the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream. In other words, they did it kind of like dog style, you know what I mean? They're lapping it up. And I thought about this, I thought it's kind of interesting, only 300 cupped their hand and brought up, you know what, if you're at war and you're taking your eyes off of the battlefield and you're just there they weren't very alert. And so God said, all of the people that did that have to go home. Only 300 had their eyes up as they were drinking, alert, ready for battle. So he says, okay, Gideon, now you're ready to go ahead and attack the Midianites with 300 guys. 300. In fact, why did God do this? Well, in verse 2 of chapter 7, we get a signal. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. Many times in life, God will have you do something in such a way that only He can get the credit. Some of you feel like you're up against insurmountable odds right now. You know what? Maybe that's because God is going to do a miracle and only He can get the credit. You won't get the credit. It won't be your wisdom, your abilities, your ability to like make moves and do stuff in your life, the moxie that you have in your life. No, instead people are going to go, there's a God. You know, there's a God. God has to show up. There's been multiple times in my life that literally God has had me step out on a limb, and if He doesn't show up, I'm in trouble. Does that make sense? Multiple times. I'm telling you, God many times will have you do something where He has to show up. Otherwise, guess what? You're screwed, right? Number 3, what's the third thing? Face your fear. Face your fear. How do you do it afraid? You face your fear. It says that in the Bible, it says that night the Lord said, get up, go down, turn to the person next to you and say, go down into the Midianite camp, for I've given you victory over them. Now listen to this. But if you are afraid, Gideon, to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah. Now here's the thing. That's not a typo. Okay, God, let me get this straight. If I'm afraid to go down to the camp, then I should go down to the camp. Did you catch that? If I'm afraid to go down to the camp, God, then you're saying I should go down to the camp. Okay. All right, actually, this is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Now, obviously, it's from God, so yes, that's why it's brilliant. But this is brilliant because the only way to control fear is to have it lose its control over you. It's the only way to do it. So how do you do it? By facing it, by getting close to it, by conquering it. You see, you want to get over the fear of speaking? Speak. Some of you are like, did you always do this for a living? No. I talked about it last week. I had my college professor basically cuss me out at my first speech in speech class. No, I'm telling you, I didn't do this. This is not comfortable for me to do. I've been doing it now for decades, but I will tell you what, still, every single week, I'm like, oh God, Lives hang on the line. This is so important. I get a little scared. This is not me. If you want to get over the fear of speaking, speak. You want to get over the fear of being bold with your faith, be bold. You want to get over the fear of giving money, give money. You want to get over the fear of being vulnerable, be vulnerable. You want to get over the fear of going to a life group? Guess what do? You go to a life group. Do what you don't want to do. Go where you don't want to go. Step out where you don't want to step out. It's the only way to conquer fear. You will not conquer fear from a distance. You have to conquer fear up close to what it is that's making you scared. You understand that? It's quiet in the room because no one wants to do that. I don't want to do it either. But here's the thing, number 4, you worship to win also. You worship to win. What does that mean? Well, Gideon sneaks into the camp and he brings his servant because he's scared. And he overhears 2 soldiers, Midianite soldiers, talking to one another. One of them had a dream. And the other one is listening to the dream. And this is what he says in Judges chapter 7. He says, your dream can mean only one thing. God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and all its allies. Like this dream basically gave a signal to the Midianites they're going to lose. And here's Gideon listening in on this. It says, when Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship before the Lord. Then he returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes. So here's the thing. Gideon got close to his fears and realized that he was going to win because of God's power. So what did he do? He worshiped, and it gave him confidence for war.